Thank you.
Great. Well, welcome everybody to the first meeting of the Torrington Housing Plan Steering Committee. This meeting is really about kind of going over, what's going to be in the housing plan, what does the process look like, and what is the role of the steering committee. And I will say up front that I know everyone is super busy. I try very hard to make the meetings 1 hour or less and very productive. Let's see here. I have some slides. Can you guys see those, or can you only see a portion of it?
Just a portion right now.
Not sure why it's doing that. Let me see if I can.
It actually looked good right at the end, right before you unshared.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let me try again here. Now my problem is I can't control my. I've got 3 screens here. All right. Let's try again.
There you go.
So you can probably see my slides down the side here, right?
Right.
Yes.
But is this big enough for?
I'm using my phone, so it's not big enough for me, but I was going to ask, we can go through this today, but could you send me copies of this in an email or maybe to the committee after?
Of course, happy to. Yep.
Thank you.
And I can try again. Do you want me to try again to make it bigger, or should I
I
just
think
stick
it's
with
okay.
It's
Okay.
okay for most, it's fine with me. If I get the copy later, I will listen really hard while you're describing it.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to introduce myself very quickly. I'm Jocelyn Ayer. I'm Community and Economic Development Director for the Northwest Hills COG. I know and have worked with most of you. Claudia, I know we've talked a couple times on the phone, but we haven't yet done much work together. And then do people want to, does everybody else on the call know each other, or do you want to introduce yourselves quickly?
Why don't we introduce ourselves quickly?
Okay, go Sharon.
Okay, Sharon Wagner. I am with Torrington Downtown Partners, and I'm also on City Council.
And Marty Connor, you know me, I think everybody, the city planner in Torrington.
Krista Malaka, the Economic Development Director.
Go ahead.
I'm Claudia Sweeney. I'm the Director of the Torrington Housing Authority.
And Jeremy Lightford, Assistant Planner, City of Torrington.
Charlie Arias, Planning and Zoning Commissioner.
Terrific. Great. All right. So, so we are working on developing your city affordable housing plan. And just to give you a little bit of background, we at the COG have been working already over the last year or so with about half of the COG towns on creating these housing plans. The city of Torrington's plan will be different because every municipality in our region has different needs. But obviously what is needed in a housing plan for Torrington is going to be different than Cornwall or Washington or Warren. So, but really the reason that we're doing this is because back in 2017, there was some new legislation passed requiring every municipality in Connecticut to have an affordable housing plan that it adopts by, it's actually, this slide is wrong. It's actually June 2022. And to update that plan every 5 years. So because of that, the state Department of Housing provided technical assistance funding to municipalities that wanted to develop a housing plan, which is what the city got, and are now moving forward with creating this plan, hopefully over the next 6 to 9 months. So the agenda for today is to briefly review with you all kind of what is in an affordable housing plan, kind of what's the purpose, contents, what kind of process are we going to go through, what is the role of you all on the steering committee, and then talk about some specific next steps we'll take in the planning process, and try to find a regular meeting date and time that we could all count on moving forward. So that's what's on the agenda. Feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions or comments or concerns.
I have a question. When you
Yeah.
develop this plan, does it have to get submitted to the state or is it just for our own use?
So the state will be, I mean, again, the state legislation requires this plan. I'm sure they will want to know that you've done it, especially since Department of Housing is providing the funding to help get it done. There is nothing currently that says specifically what has to be in your plan.
Okay.
So my hope is that this plan is useful to the city in terms of some goals and strategies around meeting Torrington's housing needs. That's what I would hope you get out of it, rather than something to just check off the box.
Yeah, Claudia, I want the plan to be endorsed by the city council. I'd
Okay.
like it endorsed by planning and zoning. And in fact, I'd like to make it an amendment to our plan of conservation and development as an update. So, and then we do plan on sending it to the state, of course, because we did get a grant to be able to work with Jocelyn on this. So,
Okay.
yeah, it will be important.
Okay.
I agree, Marty. I was going to say the plan of conservation and development as well. So that's going to be our proof positive that we're doing this.
And I really wanted you involved, Claudia, because, you're so essential to our affordable housing in Torrington. And I'm kind of hoping that it can spur ahead some of maybe help you with the grant work and getting the funding if we make sure that your project up on East Main there is part of it, because I think it's an excellent project.
Thank you. I do too.
So we'll get some mention of that in the plan for sure.
Yeah. So this slide just kind of shows you some of the typical contents of a affordable housing plan. And just to say, we will define in the plan what we mean by affordable housing. But the plan can be broader than just what is by state definition considered affordable housing. The plan itself can consider housing needs of across the spectrum. That's really up to the steering committee about what you want to focus on. But typically, again, the parts of the plan, what is the goal of the plan? What is the process that you went through to develop it? Who's on the steering committee? A little background about what the existing affordable housing stock looks like in the city, and what your current POCD city plan conservation development looks like in terms of the housing actions in there. A needs assessment summary based on the input that we get when we do some data collection around the housing stock, and potentially some either surveys and or interviews, and focusing on some specific target subsets that you guys might be interested in, like workforce rentals, seniors, upgrades needed to existing affordable housing, for example, or first-time home buyers. And then the plan will hopefully set some goals in terms of, again, either rehab goals or new construction goals for the 5-year period of the plan, and then try to, draft strategies that will help the city meet those goals over that 5-year period. So those could be zoning strategies, they could be funding strategies, they could be capacity building of the existing housing organizations in the city. And then there'll be an implementation plan, like a list of tasks that need to be done and who would be tasked with or responsible with doing them. So that is typically what would be in a affordable housing plan. Marty mentioned your plan of conservation and development. This is just some screenshots of the housing section of your current POCD. And so this planning process will really build on what is there in that housing section. And as Marty said, hopefully be adopted as sort of a part of that plan, an updated piece, and be able to get into really more depth than typically you can get into when you're doing a whole town plan on specifically housing. So the process, again, the goal of this process, according to the legislation, is to undertake a proactive planning process to really think about your housing needs and how you can meet them for both existing and future residents and workers in the city. It's the proactive part that I really focus on, and the piece that I hope we can really do is engage stakeholders in the community in the process of developing this plan. That's essential with any planning process, but to really make sure that residents and folks who work in town and employers know that the city is going through this process of trying to figure out what the housing needs are and how to best meet them over the next 5 years. So the role of the steering committee, in my mind, is really to help make sure that we're touching base with the stakeholders that we need to have the best information about what housing needs are, and also to make sure we have the strategies and goals that make sense. So at each step in this process, I will be looking for feedback from this committee in terms of, are we on the right track? Are we engaging residents? Are we engaging other key stakeholders in the conversation about housing needs and how to meet them? So you'll see up here, some of the first steps are to collect and present to you the housing needs data that we have. And then next we'll do either probably a SurveyMonkey survey or some other way of, or maybe some interviews. We'll talk about that in a bit. We can do mapping if it's needed. You have some pretty good mapping already in your town plan, but we can talk about that as the process continues. Then we would sort of develop some draft strategies and goals, have public input sessions on those, draft the plan itself, and then have more public input. And then go through the adoption process, which is what Marty was just talking about in terms of having the Planning and Zoning Commission endorse the final draft plan, and then taking it to City Council as well for endorsement. Just so you know, we do, if you're interested in more information, obviously you can reach out to me at any time. There is a bunch of resources on the COG website, which is northwesthillscog.org. And then we have a housing page on that site. There you could find, if you wanted to, our regional housing needs assessment, which shows some basic data around housing needs for all 21 of our COG towns. So you can see, if you want to kind of how Torrington's housing needs compare to some of the other towns in the region. We have a frequently asked questions document about housing plans. We have some videos and webinars that we've done around housing topics. And links to like the state created an affordable housing plan guidebook. If you're interested, it's on there. Just letting you know about those resources, which we can tap into as needed as the process continues. The way that typically we define affordable housing, just in case that's not something that you deal with every day, is housing that's affordable to folks at 80% of the area median income or less. This is the state's definition according to the 830G Affordable Housing Appeals Act. So those numbers are here. It's the Litchfield County area median that is used. And then typically, in addition to being affordable at folks' households at this income level, it also has to be monitored by someone to make sure that that the folks that live there are income eligible and that they're not paying more than 30% of their income on housing costs. Something Claudia is very familiar with. In terms of what Torrington has now, according to the Affordable Housing Appeals List, Torrington has almost 1,800 units of what qualifies as affordable housing according to the state definition, which is about a little over 10% of your total housing stock. And that breaks down to about 900 units of government assisted housing. 322 folks in Torrington are getting tenant rental assistance, which is usually through the Section 8. That's the Section 8 program, right, Claudia?
Yes.
You have 547 houses that have subsidized CHFA or USDA mortgages. So those qualify for your list of affordable housing units, and then 17 deed restricted units. So that's where that, almost 1,800 number comes from. And this just shows you how that compares to some of the neighboring towns in the region.
On the deed restricted units,
Yeah.
let's say there's more than one apartment in the unit. Does that count as, let's say, 3 apartments in a house? Does that count as 3?
Yes.
Are you talking about a 3-family? Is that what you
Yeah.
mean, Claudia?
Yeah, if you have a deed restricted, like I also run a nonprofit. I have a deed restricted property that's a 2-family. So does that count as 2 out of that 17? Or is that counting as 1? It's 1 deed, so it's 1 property that's deed restricted.
It should count as 2. But I
Okay,
will tell you that you will be shocked to learn that the state's affordable housing appeals list is not perfect.
oh, I'm shocked.
That sometimes it has mistakes in it.
Okay, I'm just asking because I'm looking at that number and it seems so low.
Well, most of the units in my experience that are affordable in our
Those are-
towns end up in that government assisted category
Okay,
because they've gotten some kind of funding from the Department of Housing or a federal, a HUD program or something. Those will all fall under that category.
those 17 units then are mine, if you're counting each apartment. So that's why I asked.
Yeah, that I'm sure that's true. And I can write to DOH. I have in other towns to get them to give me the addresses of the properties.
That would be great, actually.
And then we can, you know, if we want to check into their numbers, we can do that so we know where different, you know, projects fall within this chart.
Okay,
So that's where you are now in terms of affordable house, you know, again, state defined affordable housing in the city. You know, we did, back in November, we asked every housing authority and housing nonprofit in the region to give us their waiting list information. And I reached out to Claudia at that point. And at that point, there were 144 households on the waiting list for public housing and 868 households on the waiting list for Section 8.
still about right.
Yeah. In the other towns, just so you have a sense of in the region, there are at least 500 households on the waiting lists, and half of them are seniors. And it's not uncommon for people to have to wait 2 or more years to get off a waiting list. And Claudia, I don't know what your if
9 months to a year and a half.
okay,
But Section 8, it could be up to 4 years.
yeah. Yeah, that's pretty typical. You know, so that's sort of some of the background information. How are we defining affordable housing? What's going to be, you know, what are some of the parts of the plan? You know, the next steps in the process, again, what I'll do for the next meeting is put together some of the data around housing needs, your housing stock, your demographics, that sort of thing, and present that to you at the next meeting. One of the other things that we could do at a next meeting is talk about either a resident and or a worker or employer survey to just get some feedback from residents about what they perceive as the housing needs in the city. Typically, we do this by SurveyMonkey, and we have gotten a pretty good response rate in the other towns. One of the other reasons to do the survey is just to start to get the word out in the city that the city is working on a housing plan so that residents know that the city is working on it. So if you all think this would be a useful thing to do, I could bring to the next meeting some example questions that could be asked in a survey of residents and or a survey of folks who work in town. What do you all think about that?
If you have the sample questions, I think that might make it easier for us than trying to devise something. You're more familiar.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, what I could do is I could, you know, we've done these surveys in all of the other towns that we've been working in. So I can bring those in and then we can decide which questions make sense for Torrington, whether you want to add other questions. I can send those all to you in advance so you can, if you want to, take a look at them before the meeting and think about it.
I just work with Jocelyn on Goshen's, and she did a really good job with that one. We had a good response really from the survey. So
Good deal.
yeah,
Good deal.
she's very experienced with all this. She's been working on. all of
She's
them.
very experienced, period. I love working with her, and I know she's moving on in January, but wow. She's been a great-
And should we just start with the resident survey, or do you want to talk about at the next meeting a survey of employers or workers as well?
I think we should consider the employers, especially because we've had so many jobs available in the region and in Torrington that it might be part of what we want to find out if it's the housing situation is why
think-
they're not getting employees.
Maybe Rista can help us with some of the larger employees or even the chamber or something like that.
That sounds
Sure.
good.
I can help.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, Rita.
Would
So
we be
then-
doing these, would we be doing these as both online and paper surveys?
Yeah,
I
we
think-
usually, SurveyMonkey lets you, spit out a paper version of it. I mean, it's way easier to collate the responses if they're all online.
That's what I would suggest, do online.
Yeah.
I think like,
Yeah.
if someone really does not have access to the internet.
That's
we
what I was
should-
thinking, yeah. Just
We should
doesn't
let
have-
them, but,
Yeah.
my experience in the other towns is that, people just don't do them on paper. And we usually, we put them at the library or the senior center or whatever, and then people just don't do them, or they don't return them. But yeah, we can certainly make a paper version available. It just means somebody has to manually put in the results, which takes time.
It shouldn't be that many, but I'm just thinking for access for people that can't get to a computer, just
Yeah.
the handful that might want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we can definitely do a paper version for those folks.
It also reassures them that nobody's going to be overlooked, that they will have an option to complete a survey at one point or another.
Yeah. And again, there's no, we have a subscription to SurveyMonkey. If we want to do 2 surveys, if we want to do 3 surveys or 5 surveys, we can. In the other towns, we've just done 1 kind of at the beginning of the process, but it's a tool that could be used again to engage residents in the process over the course of the plan if you want to. So this is my last slide actually, and so the next steps in the process, again, at the next meeting, I would bring to you some of the data that we've collected around housing needs. And also we can talk about, I'll send you some example questions that you could put on a resident survey and maybe an employer survey. And we can talk about that, talk about what questions you want to ask and how you want to get the survey out to folks. And so really the only other thing to do that I have on the agenda is to talk about kind of a regular meeting time and date for this group. For me, is everybody okay with meeting by Zoom?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, I think that's the most efficient way for us
Yes.
all.
Great. And does 4 o'clock work as a time for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
Great.
And-
I love
and-
4 o'clock.
And does Tuesday work? Could we do it on a Tuesday? I know a lot of us have meetings on Monday or Wednesday or Thursday, whatever. Tuesday afternoons, once a month?
I'm good with that.
Could we stick with the 4th Tuesdays?
Sure.
Um,
yeah, that works for me.
all right, so we'll try for the 4th Tuesdays of the month, via Zoom, 4 o'clock. And that will be kind of the regular meeting date and time. And then, again, if we have to move it because of holidays or other conflicts or other meetings, we can do that. And obviously, all of these meetings will be open to the public. So if people want to join and listen in and hear what's going on, they can. The agendas will be posted on the town, on the website. And I think that's all. Do people have other questions, comments, concerns?
I think this is a great start, and I really appreciate you getting us started on this, Jocelyn, and Rista and Marty as well. I know that you've been following along with this, so I appreciate this very much.
Is there anyone else that you all think should be at the table either for these meetings and or that we should reach out to during the course of the, like, be sure to reach out to during the course of the planning process?
I think you got a pretty good representation here. You know, with Claudia, with Sharon, with town staff, and with, you know, planning and zoning member Starley.
Terrific. Okay,
Sharon, do you have any other suggestions, or Claudia?
You know, I was
Oh.
thinking, we've talked so much about emerging artists and artists looking for housing in town, and that's starting to grow. I think
Oh,
that, 5 Points Arts might be also
a great
a place
idea.
to target with our survey. I'm not sure that Judy can take on something else right now, but we may be able to reach out and get someone from 5 Points at some point.
Well, that's why I'm thinking, you know, they could get involved at the survey level. We can
Exactly.
reach out to them then, rather than have them sit through a meeting.
Yeah,
when
no, I
really
would,
we- When
yeah,
really
sit
we
through
just
'em.
want their input on pretty much the survey stuff.
Absolutely. That's why I'm thinking the input first, and then in the future, that might be an option, but I think just getting input from our young artists would be a good deal.
And if we do a
Absolutely.
public meeting, we'll make sure we get those folks on involved.
absolutely.
Good.
I would also recommend Maria Gonzalez from New Opportunities. Community Action Agencies could be a good source for us. You know, also in terms of the survey, I'm not entirely sure if we're thinking about putting it in Spanish or any other language. So, you know,
That's a
something
good
we'll have to
point,
consider.
Charlie. Yeah, I think bilingual is a wise idea.
yeah,
Um,
that's a very good point.
Jocelyn, is
Um,
there a chance that you can share these slides with us?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. Thank you for reminding me, because you had said to Sharon, I think you were gonna send it to her. Could you send it to everybody?
Yeah,
Yeah, I will send it
Okay.
to everybody right after this meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you.
So if I'm understanding right, we got October 26th at 4 o'clock for our next meeting.
Yeah,
Yes,
All right.
All right, so we will set it up through the city of Torrington Zoom then, if that's convenient for everybody.
sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can set it up as a repeat meeting, Marty, for just 4 o'clock on the fourth
Okay,
Tuesdays.
there you go, Jeremy. There's a work assignment for you.
There we go.
He didn't think he was going to get away without doing something.
That's it.
Thank you.
all right, terrific. Look, we did it in 40 minutes.
We are good. Let's hope we can keep that kind of a track record.
Yeah. Terrific. Anything
All right.
else before we go?
Off to a good start.
Great.
Yes.
All right.
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good night.